Guard Cutter Diligence, this is Key West Harbor Control. Be advised, you are entering an active engagement zone.
April 23rd, 1982. Waters just off Key West. The crew of the U.S. Coast Guard Cutter Diligence had been given a simple directive: maintain position, observe, and be prepared. They didn't know exactly what they were walking into, only that something unusual was unfolding in the harbor. A vessel approached. Not fast, not aggressive, but deliberate. A schooner, flying a flag they didn't recognize. On board, civilians, dozens of them, watching, waiting. And at the front of the vessel, a man stepped forward, dressed not in uniform, but in a naval-style jacket, a declaration in his hand. Moments earlier, he had announced the formation of a new nation, the Conch Republic. And now, they were at war. The first projectile came without warning. It burst against the hull. Then another, followed by a piece of stale Cuban bread. Then more, water balloons, conch fritters, bread. The crew stood in position, trained, disciplined, watching the attack unfold. And none of it made any sense. Welcome back to Greetings from Florida. I'm your host, Joe Torino, and today we're heading back to Key West, Florida, a place known for its sunsets, its history, and its independence. But in 1982, that independence became something official, because what you just heard was not a misunderstanding. It wasn't a joke, and it wasn't a reenactment. It actually happened. On April 23, 1982, the city of Key West declared independence from the United States, formed its own nation, declared war, and then surrendered. All in the span of about 1 minute. But this wasn't chaos, and it wasn't random. It was calculated, because what started as frustration turned into one of the most unusual and most effective acts of protest in American history. This is the story of the Conch Republic. In the early 1980s, life in Key West depended on one thing: access. There's only one road that connects the Florida Keys to the mainland, US Highway 1, a long stretch of pavement crossing bridges, islands, and open water until it finally reaches the southernmost point of the continental United States. For locals, it was a lifeline, and for tourists, it was the only way in. But in 1982, that lifeline was suddenly interrupted. Without warning, the U.S. Border Patrol set up a checkpoint just north of the Keys near Florida City, at a place known as the Last Chance Saloon. the final stretch before entering the islands. Every car was stopped, drivers were questioned, and many vehicles were searched. Agents looked under seats, inside glove compartments, in trunks, as if they were crossing into another country. But this wasn't the border. This was Florida. And almost immediately, everything backed up. Cars stretched for miles, engines idling in the heat, tourists stuck in place, locals unable to get home. Within hours, traffic had formed a line nearly 17 miles long. 17 miles of cars waiting. What should have been a simple drive turned into hours of delay, and people noticed because word spread fast across Florida, across the country, and even beyond it. Who wants to vacation somewhere where you're treated like you're crossing an international border just to get there? Reservations were canceled, hotels sat empty, restaurants lost business, and for a place like Key West, that wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. Because Key West didn't just rely on tourism, it depended on it. And now, the only connection to the mainland was being treated like a checkpoint between nations. So the city did what it could. They took it to court, filed an injunction in federal court in Miami, tried to force the roadblock to be removed, and they lost. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Cameras were rolling, microphones ready. They had just watched the city of Key West lose its case. The roadblock would remain. The checkpoint would stay. Nothing would change. City officials stepped outside, frustrated, out of options, and now on the record. Questions came quickly. What happens next? What are you going to do? Standing in front of them was Mayor Dennis Wardlow, and when he answered, he didn't hesitate. We're going to go home and secede. At first, it sounded like a joke, a line meant for the cameras, but it wasn't. And within hours, the plan was in motion. The city officials returned to Key West, not to wait, not to negotiate, but to act. A press conference was scheduled, crowds gathered, reporters repositioned, cameras rolled again. Only this time, they weren't waiting for answers. They were about to witness something entirely different. Mayor Wardlow stepped forward, dressed in a ceremonial uniform, standing behind a podium, holding a document in his hand. And in front of him was a new flag. With the press watching, he made it official. Key West declared independence, not legally, but symbolically. And in that moment, the Conch Republic was born. And if they were going to be treated like a foreign country, then they would act like one. And that meant war. Word spread quickly. A new nation had been declared. and it wasn't backing down. Out in the harbor, a schooner moved into position, flying the flag of the Conch Republic. On board, locals, officials, spectators, participants. Across from them, a vessel of the United States government, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter, Diligence. The distance between them wasn't far, but what happened next would define everything. Mayor Wardlow stood at the front of the schooner, now acting as commander-in-chief. He raised his arm and gave the order. The Conch Republic attacked. A water balloon burst against the hull, then another, followed by a piece of stale Cuban bread, then more, water balloons, conch fritters, bread. It wasn't violent, it wasn't dangerous, but it was unmistakable. This was their protest, their message, their moment. And then, as quickly as it began, it ended. In less than a minute, the Conch Republic surrendered, not out of defeat, but by design. Because immediately after surrendering, they made a request: foreign aid from the United States. At first, it looked ridiculous. A self-declared nation, a 1-minute war, an attack carried out with bread and water balloons. But that wasn't the point, because the cameras were rolling, and now the entire country was watching. The story spread fast, from Florida to national headlines. Television crews picked it up. Newspapers ran it, and suddenly, everyone was asking the same question: what is happening in Key West? And more importantly, why? The attention did something the lawsuit couldn't. It forced people to look. Because now, this wasn't just a local complaint. It was a national story, a public embarrassment, a spotlight. And not long after, the checkpoint was gone. No major announcement, no formal apology, no press conference. It was just removed. The road opened, traffic flowed again, tourists returned, reservations filled back up, and the lifeline to the mainland was restored. The protest had worked. But something else happened too, because what started as frustration had turned into something bigger. The Conch Republic didn't disappear after that day. It stayed, in flags, in festivals, in the identity of Key West itself. What began as a protest became part of the culture. Over the years, the Conch Republic staged more invasions, printed its own passports, even maintained its own navy, not as a real nation, but as something just as powerful, a state of mind. Because it was never really about leaving the United States. It was about reminding it not to forget the people at the very end of the road. Greetings from Florida is written, researched, and narrated by me, Joe Torino. Sound design and production by yours truly, with original theme music by Modern Mimes. You can find more stories, photos, and episode extras at @FlowerdAPod on Instagram, and visit flowerdapod.com for links to listen on any platform, plus the official merch store. And if you like what you hear, share the show, leave a review, or tell a friend who loves a little weird with their history. And as always, stay weird, Florida. We'll see you next time.